All right, you guys are good to go. The all lost time, it looks like, will be, I believe 101. I'm a law student, not a math student, but 2.5 hours from right now.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and call the case of the estate of Genesis Petrillo versus Peony Estates and Harper Martini.
Your Honor,
Yeah, go for it.
before we begin, may we make appearances?
Please.
Good morning. My name is Enya Edicol, along with my co-counsel, Benjamin Channinson.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Max Liu.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And we represent the plaintiff in today's case. The plaintiff has a few housekeeping matters to attend to before we begin.
Before you guys do that, does the defense want to make appearances?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Rachel Polk, and I'm joined here today by my co-counsels, Mr. Matthew York.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Ms. Lauren Peterson.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Together, we are advocating on behalf of the defendant, Ms. Harper Martini.
All right, pretrial from the plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor. First, we would like to draw the court's attention to stipulations. Mr. Liu, could you please pull up the stipulations? Per stipulation 3, it's been previously ruled that exhibits 1 through 10 are pre-admitted and can be used without laying further foundation in trial. Should we assume that they're in evidence, or would you like us to move them into evidence at this time?
What do you guys prefer for that? If you guys want to argue it each time, that's fine. If they're pre-admitted, though, and you're bringing the attention to the stipulation, if we're good with going ahead and saying they're entered, I'm fine with that.
That is our preference, Your Honor.
Any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, we'll go forward with those being pre-admitted. Anything else?
Yes. Per Rule 603, we would like to note the constructive swearing in of all witnesses.
Noted.
And per Rule 615, we would like to note the constructive sequestration of all witnesses, barring party representatives.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, we'll move forward with the constructive sequestration of all witnesses, barring the party representative.
And concerning evidence protocol, when entering exhibits other than exhibits 1 through 10, may we put evidence onto the screen to show the witness constructively outside the view of the jury until it's admitted into evidence?
Any objection to that from the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
I'm all right moving forward with that as our assumption. If there comes an issue where we think we've gone past that limited scope just for identification purposes for the witness, please feel free to object.
Will do, Your Honor. And lastly, due to the digital nature of our trial today, if at any point during trial you can't see us or hear us, please just let us know.
I indeed will. If you guys saw, the cats are running around like crazy, so if they run into all my stuff and everything crashes, I'll try to yell and stop the time for you guys.
Thank you, Your Honor. And with that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Does the defense have any pretrial matters they'd like to discuss before we move forward with openings?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, seeing as it's your first time in your courtroom, I'd like to inquire, what are your preferences regarding sitting or standing during statements?
You guys do what is most comfortable for you. With the Zoom format, I know that we may not have a lot of space available, or we may be using spaces that we don't normally use for mock trial. So go ahead and do what's best for you guys, and we won't consider that in your scores.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, I'd like to draw your attention to case law Burdett v. Copenhaver.
Can somebody put that up on the screen for me?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, quick question for presiding judge. Are you able to see the bench book that they sent us?
I have not been able to open or find a link for it, no.
Okay, I'm gonna text Scott. Sorry, you can proceed though.
Which case law were you referring to?
Burdett v. Copenhagen. Hannah.
While she's pulling it up, is there any specific part of the case law you wanted to bring the court's attention to?
Yes. The elements of civil battery are 1, an act by a defendant, 2, an intent to cause harmful or offensive contact on the part of the defendant, and 3, harmful or offensive contact to the plaintiff.
The court will so note the 3 elements of the charge.
And with that, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
Does the plaintiff have an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor, we do.
All right, if everybody could, or judges, switch to the speaker view, and we'll continue in that view for all of statements.
May I proceed?
You may.
Harper Martini was running out of time. June 8th, 2019 was a date that Harper Martini had been dreading for months. On that date, Harper's daughter, Casey Soto, her only living family member, was set to marry Genesis Petrillo. For most parents, this would be a cause of celebration, but not for Harper. You see, she didn't want the wedding to happen. Harper hated Genesis and thought she was trying to break up her family. This fear was confirmed on May 14th when Harper learned from a voicemail that Casey planned to move to France with Genesis after the wedding. Today you will learn that this made Harper so furious that to prevent the wedding from happening, Harper poisoned Genesis's wine with pesticides, an action that ultimately led to Genesis's death. For this reason, we, Genesis Petrillo's estate, are bringing suit against Harper Martini for battery. Now, it might be a little counterintuitive to translate pesticides in a bottle of wine to battery, but in Midland, any type of poisoning constitutes battery. And we only need to prove this by a preponderance of the evidence. In other words, more likely than not, 50% plus a feather. If after today's trial, you believe that it is more likely than not that Harper Martini caused Genesis harm and did so intentionally, then you must find her liable. Now, Harper's actions might puzzle you. To be frank, Harper confused me at first too. But after you hear from Casey, Harper's motivation will become clear. You see, Harper had a vision for Casey. She wanted her to take over the family business, Peony Estates. If Casey was in France, she couldn't do this. So Harper's first move was to bribe Genesis. A few weeks before the wedding, Harper offered Genesis $300,000 to leave Casey and disappear. Harper promised Genesis that if she didn't accept the money, she would get rid of her the hard way. Members of the jury, Genesis did not accept the deal. Harper was running out of time. But while the clock was ticking, Harper was not out of options. Angel Rodriguez, a member of the wedding party, will tell you that the night of the rehearsal dinner, she saw Harper in the kitchen with a can of pesticides. Then, mere hours later, Harper gifted Genesis a bottle of Cara wine that was stored in that very kitchen. Genesis then drank from the wine and became sick in a way that Angel had never seen before. Genesis was rushed to the hospital, but he succumbed to the poison. After Genesis's death, scientific tests run on that Cara bottle found that it was laced with pesticides. Dr. Jimin Kwan, the emergency physician that treated Genesis, will tell you that the same pesticides found in the bottle were found in Genesis's blood and stomach. Dr. Kwan will conclude that the wine that Genesis ingested caused her death. Now, after I'm finished talking, defense counsel will get up before you and asks you to focus on something else. That's their right. But as they talk, I encourage you to focus on the facts. Facts that at the end of today's trial will be clear. If you follow the pesticides from the kitchen to the car of wine to Genesis, it will lead you to one place and one conclusion. It will lead you straight to Harper, a woman who was running out of time. And for that reason, at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Max Liu, will ask that you hold Harper Martini liable.
Opening from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed when ready.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. We are here today because our client, Harper Martini, has been accused of poisoning her child's fiance, an unfounded claim to say the least. And as we navigate today's case, you will notice an unmistakable lack of evidence. Simply put, there are not enough facts to prove the act. Miss Petrillo and Miss Martini had a bitter relationship, but this bitterness was no different than the stereotypical relationship people have with their in-laws. Yet, the plaintiff will use this relationship to paint a picture, implying Miss Martini is the villain of this story. But make no mistake, that is simply not true. This bitter relationship between Miss Martini and Miss Petrillo was not a one-way street. Miss Martini tried to bury the hatchet with Miss Petrillo on multiple occasions, compared to the 0 attempts of Miss Petrillo to do so. Miss Martini is not the villain. Members of the jury, as the state describes their version of the story that night, I want you to listen closely. You will hear how Miss Martini was in fact not the one to hand the bottle of Caroline to Miss Petrillo that night. And who knows what could have happened during that time. You will also hear about how a key piece of evidence in this case, the Cara wine bottle, was in fact contaminated with pesticides after Miss Petrillo drank it, not before. Finally, you will hear the story of Miss Martini. Now, the state is going to try to describe Miss Martini as hateful, devious, an overprotective and overbearing mother. But Miss Martini is none of these things. Members of the jury, you will hear from 3 witnesses today. First, Blair Osborne, a longtime work friend of Miss Martini. And she will tell you about her experience that night, as well as her testament to Miss Martini's character. Second, you will hear from Dr. Cannon. Now, Dr. Cannon has reviewed the death of Miss Petrillo and is here today to explain other possibilities of Miss Petrillo's death to you. Finally, you will hear from Harper Martini. And by then, the plaintiff will have made you perceive Miss Martini in a negative way. But we are in a court, and a court deserves justice, and justice demands your unbiased attention. So when Miss Martini is on the stand, we ask that you give her a fair trial. Make no assumptions about her and truly listen to what Miss Martini has to say. Again, we ask that you take a step back from the case and truly listen to the facts. Members of the jury, the plaintiff has just told you their version of the story. And as you may have noticed, their main focus was the preponderance of evidence. And to understand why is the foundational reason we are here today. Members of the jury, you might be wondering to yourselves, why is a battery case being held in civil court instead of criminal? Well, the answer is simple. The plaintiff knows they lack the evidence to prove Miss Martini did in fact poison Miss Petrillo. Instead, the plaintiff only has to make it appear probable, yet they will struggle to do even that, since there are simply not enough facts to prove the act. Members of the jury, For battery to be applied in today's case, the plaintiff must prove 3 elements. Number 1, there was an act committed by Ms. Martini. Number 2, there was intent to cause harm to Ms. Petrillo. And number 3, there was harmful contact from Ms. Martini onto Ms. Petrillo. I want you to focus on the first one today. Today, you will not hear any concrete evidence of an act from Ms. Martini onto Ms. Petrillo. The burden of proof is simply too large for the plaintiff to bear in today's case. There are not enough facts to prove the act. This death was tragic, but make no mistake, this case, which blames Ms. Martini for the death of Ms. Petrillo, is not a means to justice. Ms. Petrillo's death was an unforeseen accident, not an intentional act committed by Ms. Martini. Punishing an innocent person like Ms. Martini creates 2 victims, which is why at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Lauren Peterson, will come before you and ask you to find Harper Martini not liable for the death of Genesis Petrillo.
Does the plaintiff have any witnesses to call?
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls Angel Rodriguez.
I'll also ask that everyone switch over to gallery view so we can see the witness and attorney at the same time. Thank you.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Hi, my name is Angel Rodriguez.
Tell us about yourself.
Well, by day, I'm Rapid River Valley's premier pre-K educator, Teacher of the Year for 3 years running. But by night, I dominate Midland's trivia scene. I mean, you name a bar around Midlands, and I've won a round or 2 of trivia there. Genesis, Casey, and I were actually one of the best teams in the Tri-County area, at least before everything happened.
Who's Genesis?
Genesis was one of the best friends I ever had. She passed away last year.
And what kind of person was Genesis?
You know, she was just the type of person that you always wanted to be around. Whether it was in competition or at the bar getting drinks, she was just so vocal and enthusiastic. She also had this ability to really stand up for people she cared about, especially when it came to Casey.
And who's Casey?
Casey was Genesis's girlfriend, and later on, her fiance. She's really just such a nice person, but I guess we don't talk as much as we used to.
What was Casey and Genesis's relationship like?
When I met them in 2016, they just struck me as the sweetest couple you've ever met. I mean, move over Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth, because Pride and Prejudice had nothing on Genesis and Casey's love story. They just seemed like the type of couple that had always been together and always would be. They finally got engaged in 2018.
Were you there when they got engaged?
Yeah, I was. I remember hiding behind a Planatus occidentalis, the common sycamore, at the botanical gardens to film the moment that Genesis got down on one knee. It was so romantic. I mean, their whole wedding was. Picture Gustav Klimt's The Kiss meets Renee Magritte's The Lovers. But things got a little more Romeo and Juliet once Harper got involved.
Who's Harper?
Harper Martini is Casey's mom. Let's just say she's the kind of parent that I would hate to meet at parent-teacher conferences. I mean, she was just such a helicopter parent. She fought Genesis on every little detail of the wedding. The bridesmaids' dresses, the food, even the flowers. But the biggest dispute they had was about the venue.
What was wrong with the venue?
Well, nothing really was wrong with it, but Harper wanted to hold the wedding at her winery and bed and breakfast, Peony Estates. I didn't really mind too much. I mean, in flower code, the peony symbolizes good fortune and happy marriage. But it was sort of an abrupt change.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about the wedding weekend. When did you arrive?
We all showed up at Peony Estates on June 7th for the rehearsal dinner.
And how was the dinner?
You know, it was kind of like John Steinbeck's of Mice and Men. You know, things started off well enough, but as the weekend went on, not so much.
For those of us who haven't read that book, Miss Rodriguez, what do you mean?
Well, the whole day started with Harper and Genesis's usual back and forth, but tension was way higher than normal. Harper in particular was acting super weird.
What do you mean Harper was acting super weird?
Well, at one point, I was in the kitchen checking out the antique stonework. You know, last year, the winner of the Midlands Trivia League won on a question about architecture, and I've never fully lived it down. And I ran right into Harper carrying a bottle of pesticides.
What was Harper doing with pesticides in the kitchen?
Well, that's what I asked her, and she told me it was for Genesis, because Genesis was such a pest. And then she told me she was going to spray the kitchen or something.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Do you have a response to the hearsay objection?
Yes, Your Honor. This is party opponent. It is not hearsay.
Ms. Bulk?
Your Honor, the witness, Angel Rodriguez, mentioned that Harper Martini said something regarding killing a pest, Genesis.
On grounds of opposing party admission by the party opponent, I'm going to let that through. So
Yes, Your
you
Honor.
are overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. How did the rest of the rehearsal dinner go?
Well, I thought things were getting better at around 10 o'clock when Harper came out with this unique wine for Genesis. I mean, she gave her this big bottle labeled Cara and said, "This is for you. After all, you're marrying my only daughter." Everyone else in the party got a bottle of wine too, but Genesis was the only one who got that specific type, the Cara.
Would you recognize a picture of that bottle of wine?
Yeah, I think so.
Mr. Channinson, could you get Exhibit 2A up on the screen? Is this the wine bottle you saw?
Yep, that's the Cara, all right.
And who all drank the Cara?
Well, Genesis did, mostly. I mean, she offered it to everyone at the table, but I was the only one who actually took a sip. It was a really bizarre wine. I mean, I did a summer tour in Catalona where we did wine tasting, so I would say that I have a pretty eclectic palate, but I've never actually had any wine that tasted like that. Honestly, I spat it out right away.
Did anyone else drink the Cara?
No, I mean, we're really much more of like a margaritas type of crowd.
Thank you, Mr. Channinson. You can take that exhibit down now. You said that Genesis drank most of that wine. How was she acting after?
Something was definitely off. After she finished that bottle, she was uncoordinated and her speech was slurred, but it really didn't make sense to me that she would be drunk, because she'd only had a few glasses of wine. I mean, red wine makes me sleepy too, but this was definitely something else. When I asked her if...
To lack of personal knowledge on whether Genesis would be drunk or not.
Response?
Your Honor, we're not saying that Genesis was drunk. We're just saying that per Angel's previous experiences with Genesis, after going out many times drinking with Genesis, that it did not make sense to her that Genesis would be drunk. This is within her rationally based perception.
I do believe that the witness testified based on what they saw and what they knew to be true in the form of an opinion. So I'm going to allow that through. Overruled. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
You said that Genesis was acting a little bit different after a few glasses of wine. Did you ask her if she was doing okay?
I did, and she told me this isn't a kind of feeling that I've felt before. I decided to take her back up to her room.
And then what happened after that?
Well, I take her back up to her room, thinking, that maybe she'd be able to sleep it off. But we get up there and, she's sweating buckets and she just won't stop vomiting. I mean, she couldn't even hold down water. At some point, she just blacks out completely.
What did you do?
Oh, I call 911. When I get to the hospital, they tell me that something is seriously wrong with Genesis, that they even think she's been poisoned. I guess that's when I realized that what's happening now, it's bigger than the wedding. So I go back to the hotel and I tell Casey.
And what happens when you get back to the hotel?
Well, right when I get through the door, I immediately run into Harper. Before I even have the chance to tell her anything, she looks at me and she says, Genesis got poisoned? Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding.
When exactly did this exchange with Harper happen?
It was literally right after I got back from the hospital. I hadn't had a chance to tell anyone that Genesis had been poisoned.
So, Miss Rodriguez, if you didn't tell Harper that Genesis was poisoned, how did Harper know?
I have no idea.
Did you tell Casey?
Of course, I ran right to her room. She was in her dress, but we just ran right out the hotel and straight to the hospital.
And what happened when you got to the hospital?
We were late. 5 minutes too late. By the time Casey and I got to the hospital, Genesis was gone.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Miss Polk, Cross,
Yes, Your Honor.
go ahead when ready.
You were close with Casey and Genesis, weren't you?
Yep. I mean, we were one of the best trivia teams in Midlands.
So close that you were in their wedding party.
That's right. I was Genesis's maid of honor.
So you knew Harper was very involved with the planning of the wedding?
You could say that. I mean, if there was a thing happening, she had an opinion on it. It was something.
And she even offered to host the wedding at Harper's Winery, Peony Estates, which she owned, didn't she?
Well, I wouldn't say offered. I would say demanded. I mean, they had already scheduled the venue to be at Rosie and Pedro's, which is another local winery in Rapid River Valley, but she made them switch.
But you would agree that Harper cared about the success of the wedding.
Yeah.
And you went to the wedding party at Black Bear Casino, correct?
Oh, yeah, I think we did. It was in early May.
And you found Genesis vomiting in the hotel bathroom, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, that was a wild night. Genesis had 3 glasses of wine. We were crazy.
You attributed this to Genesis drinking too much that night.
Yeah, I mean, 3 glasses of wine.
And on the night of the rehearsal dinner, you saw Harper holding a can of pesticide.
Yeah, in the kitchens.
But she said this was simply to kill a cockroach, didn't she?
Well, no, not at first. She said that the pesticides were for Genesis, and then she said that she was just kidding. She guessed.
Miss Rodriguez, she said it was to kill a cockroach crawling around, didn't she?
Well, after she said that, she was like, it was to deal with a pest in the kitchen. Yeah, I guess.
Now, you would say Genesis is a heavy drinker, correct?
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes we go out and like we'll finish a whole bottle of wine in one night. We're kind of crazy party people.
And you were even surprised she wasn't drinking as much on the night of the rehearsal dinner, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, she just had like a glass. I guess she just, wanted to be prepared for the wedding the next day.
Now, I want to move on to later in the evening. Harper surprised everyone by toasting Genesis, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. She gave her the bottle of Cara wine.
And you saw her give this fancy bottle of wine in front of the whole wedding party?
Yeah, that's correct.
You said Genesis was relieved by this gesture. Happy, even?
I mean, things were so tense at the wedding. There was this one point that Genesis thought that Harper was going to kill him. So, yeah, I mean, it was nice to see her try to extend an olive branch.
Ms. Rodriguez, to be clear, Genesis was happy from this gesture of Harper, correct?
Yeah, she seemed relieved.
And you saw Genesis drink this wine?
Yeah.
And you even took a sip yourself.
Oh, yeah, but it was a funky tasting wine. I mean, I spat it right out.
Afterwards, you saw Genesis drinking several more glasses of wine, correct?
I couldn't tell you the exact number, but yeah, I think she had like 2.
She had slurred speech and lack of coordination.
Yeah, but I mean, she wasn't drunk.
She even ordered more alcohol after, tequila shots.
No, Genesis never drank any tequila shots.
She did order more alcohol after, correct, Miss Rodriguez?
Yeah, like the party wanted a round of tequila shots and we had some, but I never saw Genesis drink any.
Afterwards, you had a conversation with Drew, Harper's employee.
Yeah, that's correct.
He told you that he and Harper wiped down all of the surfaces and removed any bottles or cask of wine from the area that night, correct?
Yeah, I guess he said something like that.
Afterwards, you noticed that Genesis was getting ill and you took them to the hospital, didn't you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've never seen anyone that sick in my whole life.
The doctor told you it was likely due to some kind of poisoning.
That's correct.
The doctor didn't specify whether it was alcohol or pesticide poisoning, did they?
I guess I don't remember exactly. They just said it was some kind of poisoning.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, I just asked that my witness be able to virtually step down from the stand.
Ms. Rodriguez, you are excused. Call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Defense calls Dr. Jimin Kwan.
Dr. Kwan, please take the stand.
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed when ready.
Can I have a moment to put in scores?
Sure, let us know when you're ready and we'll move on.
Thank you.
Plaintiff, please proceed.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good morning. I'm Dr. Jimin Kwan.
What do you specialize in, doctor?
Well, I'm an emergency physician at River Valley Hospital in Midlands, and I specialize in medical toxicology.
Where did you go to school?
I got my MD at the University of North Carolina and completed my emergency medical residency, as well as my toxicology fellowship at Emory.
How long have you been practicing medicine?
Have about 19 years of experience with both diagnosing and treating poisoning cases. I'm actually the chief emergency physician at River Valley, so I consult on all of our poisoning cases and actually help teach some of our residents.
Were you working at the hospital on the morning of June 8th, 2019?
Yes, I was.
Did you treat Genesis Petrillo?
Yes, I was in charge of her case.
Why was she admitted?
Well, Genesis was vomiting constantly, and she couldn't walk. She was coming from a wedding dinner at almost 3 a.m., and we see alcohol poisoning a lot in that situation. So that is what I expected at first.
How did you determine whether or not it was alcohol poisoning?
Well, when we suspect alcohol poisoning, we check for 3 specific symptoms: a fast pulse, dilated pupils, and a loss of motor control.
Is this method standard in your field?
Yes, it is.
Did you apply this method reliably in this case?
Yes, this was the method I used.
Was it alcohol poisoning?
Well, once I began my examination, it was clear that alcohol poisoning just didn't make sense. Genesis actually displayed the opposite of the symptoms I mentioned before. She had a slow pulse, not fast. Her pupils were contracted, not dilated, and she was having muscle spasms, which actually isn't what we see when people lose motor control.
Now, Dr. Kwan, after you determined that it was not alcohol poisoning, what did you do next?
I continued with my comprehensive examination of Genesis. This basically consisted of taking her vitals, examining all their bodily systems for anything that would help me come to a diagnosis.
Is this standard?
Absolutely. In fact, it's the method I discussed in one of my recent peer-reviewed articles, where I spoke more about the process of diagnosis in the ER.
Did you apply this method reliably?
Yes, I did.
Did you learn anything from your full body examination?
Yes, I did. I found evidence that Genesis had ingested a potentially deadly amount of organophosphates.
Now, Dr. Kwan, can you define organophosphates for the members of the jury?
Sure, they're just a common kind of pesticide here in Midlands.
What evidence of organophosphates did you find?
Well, Genesis was tearing up, she had a rapid pulse, and she was having muscle spasms and couldn't control her bladder. These symptoms, as well as the order in which they happened, are actually unique to organophosphate poisoning. And I mentioned before that Genesis's pupils were contracting, and the only common pesticide used in Midlands that causes pupil contraction are organophosphates.
After you learned that Genesis had ingested organophosphates, what did you do next?
Well, this kind of poisoning acts really fast. It can quickly lead to your lungs and your brain shutting down. So I administered the pesticide antidote, which is a medication known as atropine, and ordered some tests to confirm my diagnosis.
Did the antidote work?
Unfortunately, by that time, Genesis's poison had progressed too far. Genesis slipped into a coma and eventually passed away when her lungs failed later that morning.
Were you ever able to confirm whether organophosphates caused Ms. Petrillo's death?
Yes, I got the results of both those tests I ordered.
Would you recognize those results if I were to show you them today?
Yes, I would.
All right, Dr. Kwan, we'll take these one by one. Mr. Liu, can you please display Exhibit 5 on the screen? What does this first test tell us?
This first test confirms my diagnosis of organophosphate poisoning.
How does it do that?
It tests for a specific enzyme called acetylcholinesterase. You can also call it ACHE.
What's ACHE, doctor?
Well, I usually explain it to my students like this. Think of your brain as a computer that sends out signals, and your body as a printer that acts on those signals by printing them. ACHE is kind of like the cancel button. If your brain doesn't want an action to happen anymore, it can stop your body by pressing the cancel button or making ACHE.
What does this test have to do with ACHE?
Well, this test shows that Genesis had extremely low levels of ACHE. What that means is your body doesn't have that cancel button anymore. It keeps printing actions that your brain doesn't want it to. And what this leads to is muscle spasms, and in more extreme cases, your lungs and your brain failing.
Why is this important, doctor?
The only drug or disease shown to lower ACHE are organophosphates. There's simply nothing that explains this result besides organophosphate poisoning.
Now, Mr. Liu, can you please display Exhibit 6 on the screen? What does this second test tell us, Dr. Kwan?
This test tells us that the organophosphates were actually found in the wine that Genesis ingested.
How can you make this conclusion?
Well, as you can see, the two substances that were present in her stomach were organophosphates and wine. Trace amounts of food were found, but none of it tested positive for organophosphates.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. You can take that off the screen now. Dr. Kwan, could Genesis have died of alcohol poisoning?
I found no evidence of that. Like I mentioned before, most of her symptoms were the opposite of what you'd see with alcohol poisoning. And Genesis's blood alcohol level was also significantly lower than the blood alcohol level required to cause death from alcohol poisoning.
What was your final diagnosis?
I concluded that Genesis died from respiratory arrest due to ingesting organophosphate pesticides.
And did you determine the source of the poison?
Yes, I determined that the poisoning was from the wine that the patient ingested with dinner.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross,
Yes, Your Honor.
proceed when you're ready.
Good morning, Dr. Kwan.
Good morning.
Now, you're on the board of directors of Doctors for Organic Solutions, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And this is a group that advocates against the use of chemical pesticides. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes.
So today's case with the cause of death being tied to pesticide poisoning would be very important to this group, right?
Yes, unfortunately, Genesis's case is one of many that shows what a scourge chemical pesticides can be on our society.
Right, and you're actually hoping that today's case will convince legislators to outright ban the use of chemical pesticides.
Like I mentioned before, I think it's really important that legislators see cases like Genesis's to see how horrible chemical pesticides are. This is one of many examples.
Okay, Dr. Kwan. So let's talk about the night in question. When you initially admitted Petrillo, you suspected a case of alcohol poisoning, right?
Yeah, when she first walked in, she was stumbling. It was 3 a.m. That's usually what we expect at that time.
And prior to your full examination, those initial symptoms were all consistent with alcohol poisoning, right?
Yeah, it was clear that she had some type of poisoning. There are a lot of symptoms that show that your body is trying to get rid of toxins. So, for example, vomiting shows that your body is trying to flush out the toxins. So it's pretty clear to me that it was some kind of poisoning.
Okay, Dr. Kwan. And Petrillo also confirmed that they had been drinking a lot of wine that evening, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so now during your full examination, this is when you noted several other symptoms that were inconsistent with alcohol poisoning. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then you ordered the poisons and toxins analysis on top of the regular toxicology report.
Yes, exactly.
So when Petrillo passed away, you noted her cause of death as respiratory failure due to pesticide poisoning, right?
That's correct.
But you noted this cause of death before any of the test results were returned. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I had enough information from my full body examination to make a diagnosis of organophosphate poisoning. The test simply served to confirm that diagnosis.
Okay, Dr. Kwan. So after the testing results returned, Petrillo's test results showed a BAC of 0.16. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And is it correct that this level of BAC can cause significant symptoms?
Yeah, dizziness, stumbling, stuff like that.
Nausea,
Nausea as well.
vomiting.
Sure, like I mentioned, consistent with poisoning.
Now, another thing that you noted concern about was Petrillo's low levels of acetylcholinesterase, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And on direct, you said that there is no drug or disease that could possibly lower these levels besides the pesticide, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But there actually are other factors that can lead to lower enzyme levels, correct?
No, there's no other drug or disease that can lead to specific ACHE lower levels.
But cholinesterase enzyme levels can be lowered by other health factors, such as a chronic disorder. Is that right?
No, actually. So ACHE is part of a bigger family of enzymes called...
Dr. Kwan, is it your testimony today that there are no other drugs?
Your Honor, I asked that my witness be allowed to answer her question.
Let Dr. Kwan finish her answer and feel free to move on from there, Ms. Peterson.
Yes, Your Honor.
Like I was saying, ACHE is part of a bigger family of enzymes called cholinesterases. Now, other types of cholinesterases can be lowered and higher by different things, but ACHE in particular can only be affected by organophosphate pesticides.
Okay, Dr. Kwan. So I want to talk about Petrillo's stomach contents that night that were tested.
Sure.
Now, any food and drink items that Petrillo consumed that night would have dissolved in her stomach. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Along with the Cara wine.
Yes, that's right.
And then all of those dissolved items would have mixed inside Petrillo's stomach.
Yes, and as I mentioned, the test did detect some of those. There were traces of food found.
Right. Now, the wine from Petrillo's stomach was tested and contained a pesticide, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But it is a possibility that one of the other food or drink items could have been contaminated instead, correct?
Well, it's a possibility, but I found no evidence of that. Like I mentioned, the trace amounts of food were tested, but there was no organophosphate pesticide in them.
Okay, Dr. Kwan, but if another food item was contaminated, this contaminated item could have contaminated the wine inside of Petrio's stomach when they mixed, correct?
It's possible, but I found absolutely no evidence of that.
So, Dr. Kwan, it is a possibility that the wine wasn't contaminated when Petrio consumed it that night.
It's highly unlikely. It's possible, but not probable.
Dr. Kwan, I'm not asking you what's likely. I'm asking you if it is a possibility.
It's possible, but not probable.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect for Dr. Kwan?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked if my witness may be excused.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. You are excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, go ahead and call your next witness.
Plaintiff calls Casey Soto. May I proceed?
Other judge, are we good? Do you need another minute or are you good?
All set. Thank you.
All right, let's go for it.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hello, I'm Casey Soto.
Ms. Soto, why are you here today?
My fiance, Genesis Petrillo, died on the day of her wedding, and people thought it was a good idea to drag me back into all this heartache.
I understand this might be difficult for you, and we'll try to get you out of here as soon as possible. But first, can you tell us about your relationship with Genesis?
Genesis was amazing. She always supported me no matter what. She was just so good to be around. Even though she's gone, I still love her so much.
Do you know the defendant, Harper Martini?
Of course I do. She's my mother.
What was your relationship with the defendant like?
Harper could be a little controlling. She didn't have any family other than me and put a lot of love and time and energy just into me. She was a helicopter parent, I guess.
We've heard a lot today about the defendant's relationship with Genesis. Can you share your perspective?
It was just me and my mother for a long time. So when it came time for her to share me, Mom took it pretty hard. She didn't get along well with Genesis at all and got even harder after Genesis and I had gotten engaged.
Why do you say that?
My mom freaked out when I told her about the engagement. And despite everything, my mom still tried to take over the wedding planning. She said she would pay for a big part of the wedding if we had it at Peony Estates.
Did you accept the offer?
Yes. Genesis and I were planning on moving to France after the wedding, so the extra money would have come in helpful.
How soon after the wedding did you two plan on moving to France?
We were going to leave immediately after the wedding. We wanted to get our lives started in France as soon as possible.
Did the defendant know about your plans?
Not for a while. I didn't want to tell her until Genesis and I were too far for my mother to do anything about us moving.
Why didn't you want to tell your mother?
Ever since opening Peony Estates, my mom would always talk about me taking over the business one day, so I knew she wouldn't take me moving away very well. I didn't want her to do anything extreme, I guess. She found out eventually, though.
How did the defendant find out?
Genesis, actually. A few days before the wedding, Genesis, some friends, and I had gone out to celebrate finishing all the wedding preparations. We had a lot of fun, maybe too much fun, because Genesis ended up calling my mom while drunk and spilling the beans about our move.
How did the defendant respond?
I don't think I've ever seen my mother so angry. She just kept screaming about needing someone to take over Peony Estates and how terrible it would be for Genesis to force me to abandon Harper. She said that Genesis could stay, move to France, or end up 6 feet under, but that I would be staying in Midlands. Like, I didn't have a say in the matter.
Did this affect your wedding plans?
It definitely made things a lot more tense between Genesis and my mother. She made it seem like Genesis was taking me away from her. In fact, my mother and I fought before the rehearsal dinner about my plans to move to France. It all made me very angry, so I told her that after the wedding, the next day, she wouldn't have to worry about me or Genesis ever again.
How did the defendant react to that?
I don't know, but out of nowhere, my mother makes this grand gesture to Genesis during the rehearsal dinner and gives her this brand new bottle of Cara wine. Genesis brought it back to the table and poured a few glasses.
I want to talk a little bit more about the Cara wine. Who was drinking it?
One of the glasses was definitely for Genesis. She had it right in front of her plate when I left the rehearsal dinner. I'm not sure if the second glass was for her or someone else, though.
Did you see anyone else drinking the Cara wine?
No, I didn't see anyone else drinking the wine.
I want to talk about the morning of June 8th, 2019. How'd you learn that Genesis was in the hospital?
Angel told me. The only words I heard from her were Genesis, coma, and pesticide before I had rushed out in full wedding garb to get to Genesis at the hospital.
What happened once you got to the hospital?
We were too late. Genesis had died 5 minutes before Angel and I got there. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't breathe. I had no idea how Genesis could have gotten sick. I ate and drank everything she did at the rehearsal.
Miss Soto, is there anything that Genesis had that you didn't?
I guess the wine that my mother gave her. And I know what you're going to ask. It's what everyone has been saying, that Harper poisoned Genesis, but I can't believe it. I don't want to believe that my mother could kill my fiance, but no, she loves me. She loves me.
Thank you, Miss Soto. Nothing further.
Cross,
Yes, Your Honor.
proceed when ready.
Good morning, Miss Soto. Miss Martini, she was your mother, correct?
Yes, is my mother.
Yeah. And you would say she valued your happiness, right?
That's what I always thought.
And you were engaged to Miss Petrillo?
Yes.
And Miss Petrillo and Miss Martini, they never were exactly close, right?
No, my mother hated Genesis.
But when Miss Martini, sorry, let me rephrase. Miss Martini still made an effort to get along with Miss Petrillo, right?
Well, every once in a while, she would try to make things right between them, but it never worked.
And when you announced your engagement to Miss Petrillo, Miss Martini offered to host it at Peony Estates, right?
Yes, she told me that she wanted to have it at Peony Estates. We had planned it to be somewhere else, but Harper, my mom, really wanted us to have it at Peony Estates.
And this act was out of good faith, right?
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation.
Response, Mr. York.
Your Honor, Miss Martini offered to host the wedding at her own winery because it was her daughter and she wanted to host it.
May I respond?
You may.
Your Honor, Miss Soto does not have the adequate knowledge to determine whether Miss Martini was acting out of good faith or whether she was acting out of other interests, maybe her business interests. To do so, Miss Soto would have to delve into the mindset of Miss Martini, which is speculation.
Any response, Mr. York?
One thing, Your Honor, Miss Martini did this as a gift. Gifts are in good faith.
I'm going to have to sustain the speculation objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, I'd like to talk about the night of the rehearsal dinner. Miss Martini presented Miss Petrillo with a bottle of Cara wine that night, right?
Yes, yeah.
And this gesture was sincere, right?
Well, it certainly seemed sincere to me at the time.
And Miss Petrillo was happy to receive this gift, right?
She was confused, but she did bring it back to the table. I think mostly to make me happy.
But she was so happy that she immediately poured 2 glasses of wine, right?
She did pour some wine. I think maybe she just wanted to show to Harper that she was enjoying the gift.
And after dinner, you went up to your room and Miss Petrillo continued to mingle with guests, right?
Yes, I was pretty tired after all the drama that day, so I decided to turn in early.
And the next day, you got the awful news that Miss Petrillo was in a coma and eventually passed away, right?
Yes.
And when you heard it was possibly pesticide poisoning, that didn't make sense to you, right?
Well, I'm not a doctor. I just had no idea. I just had no idea what was happening.
Now, Casey, you've heard the allegations that your mother was somehow involved in poisoning Miss Petrillo, right?
Yes.
Yet you find it hard to believe that your mother was involved, don't you?
I don't want to believe that my mother could do something like that. It would make everything I've known about her just false, and I don't know if I can handle that.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, I simply asked that Miss Soto be allowed to step down.
Miss Soto, you're excused. Anything further from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor, with that, we rest our case in chief and request the brief 5 to 10 minute recess.
How are we doing on time?
Your Honor, all losses at 1:01.
So we're pretty good on time. We can go ahead and take 10 minutes. That's fine by me. So at the 40 mark.
Your Honor, would you be able to create breakout rooms for us so we can talk with our teams during the recess?
Possibly. I've not done it before. So if anybody wants to explain how I do that, I will gladly try.
I believe it should be under, if you see more, the 3 dots, or...
It looks like I do not have the ability to do that. I only have stop live streaming. So they probably made it so we couldn't do that.
All right, no worries. Thank you.
We've got about a minute until teams. I want you to check and make sure everybody's back from your team and let me know that we're good to start back up.
Defense is here and ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Thank you. Is the plaintiff team accounted for and ready to proceed?
Just a moment, Your Honor. We just want to make sure.
Thank you.
Plaintiff is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
The plaintiff having rested their case, does the defense have a case to present today?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense is ready to proceed.
You may call your first witness.
The defense calls Blair Osborne to the stand.
Miss Osborne. Let me
Please
just make sure that my co-judge is back and ready.
Yes, Your
All
Honor.
set.
All right.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hi, my name is Blair Osborne.
And what do you do for a living, Miss Osborne?
I'm a private event planner in Rapid River Valley, Midlands. I own Bliss Flair Events, the best event planning business in Midlands. We've actually been named #1 most highly recommended event planning service in the area by Savior Magazine, not just once, but 4 times.
How do you know Harper?
I met Harper and her daughter Casey in 2015, when Harper came to my rescue. As an event planner, I tend to be a little overwhelmed with so many fabulous projects, and I was desperate because I double booked myself. Luckily, Harper was there and offered Peony Estates as an alternate venue for an event. She was a lifesaver, and we made a lasting business relationship after that.
You mentioned being an event planner. Were you involved in planning the wedding of Harper's daughter, Casey?
Yes, of course. I was honored that she asked for my help because it felt like I was planning for family.
Could you tell the members of the jury what your interactions with Harper were like while planning the wedding?
Well, Harper was very involved while planning the wedding. She didn't initially tell Casey about my involvement, but I figured she wanted to keep it a surprise, that she hired the best event planner in Midlands.
When did Casey find out about your involvement in the wedding?
I met with Casey and her fiance Genesis on January 12, 2019 for the first time. It was a very pleasant meeting, and Casey seemed to be happy with the work I'd done so far, but I mean, who wouldn't be?
Did Harper mention to you how she felt about Genesis and Casey's relationship?
Well, she made it pretty clear that she wasn't a big fan of their relationship. But in the end, I think she just wanted what made Casey happy, which was apparent by how invested she was with planning the wedding. And I see this a lot with mother-in-laws and wedding planning.
How did the planning of the wedding go after the initial meeting with Casey?
There was a bit of tension between Genesis, Harper, and I during the planning process, but nothing I couldn't handle owning the #1 event planning business in Midlands, But then I just started to focus on the rehearsal dinner, and getting those centerpieces figured out was such a nightmare.
How did the rehearsal dinner go?
Well, not to toot my own horn, but the rehearsal dinner was spectacular. Everything was beautiful, including those centerpieces I mentioned earlier. And Harper and Genesis seemed to finally start getting along.
How are they getting along?
Harper was very eager to smooth things over with Genesis. To my surprise, she even presented Genesis with a beautiful bottle of wine from her own winery in front of everyone.
Did the gesture of giving the bottle of wine raise any concern to you?
No, not at all. It was a very moving moment that even made me tear up a bit, which is rare for an event planner. But it truly showed how much Harper loved Casey. In that moment, it was apparent that Harper decided to leave all her drama in the past and just move forward.
Did Genesis seem to enjoy this wine?
Yeah, I saw
Objection, Your
Genesis pouring.
To speculation.
Grounds?
The witness is just speaking into how Genesis felt about the wine. She would have to dive into the mindset of Genesis Petrillo in order to say as to how she felt about the wine.
Miss Polk?
Your Honor, I'm only asking of Miss Osborne's perspective as she was with Genesis the entire night, of whether she seemed to like the wine, which she will get into if we can proceed.
Any
May I
response?
respond, Your Honor? Yes, Your Honor. Whether or not Genesis liked the wine, that is not necessarily an opinion. That is a matter of how Genesis actually felt, which is part of her mindset. And Miss Osborne cannot speak to her actual mindset. That would require delving into the mindset, which is why this is speculation.
I'm going to sustain that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. So how did the next day go after the rehearsal dinner?
Well, Harper was very eager for the wedding and wanted everything to be perfect for Casey. She even told me, I just want the wedding to be as wonderful as your marriage will be. I thought this was very sweet of Harper, but unfortunately, things didn't go as planned.
What happened?
Angel Rodriguez came in and told Casey that Genesis was in a coma. So naturally, the wedding, which we all worked so hard for, was canceled. And I've heard rumors that Harper was somehow involved with the poisoning of Genesis, but I just don't believe it.
And why don't you believe that Harper was involved?
Well, for starters, I've never seen anything but the highest standards of hygiene and safety when it comes to Peony Estates Winery. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be associated with them. Additionally, Harper's one of the most kind people I've ever met. She loved Casey so much and just wanted the wedding to go flawlessly.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Ms. Osborne, I'd like to discuss the tensions between Harper and Genesis during the wedding planning. You thought the wedding was doomed from the very start.
Well, I thought it was going downhill, but I mean, nothing I couldn't handle.
Ms. Osborne, are you saying that you didn't think it was doomed from the very start?
No, that's not what I said. I just think that it was, but it wasn't nothing I couldn't handle.
Before you came to trial today, you had created an affidavit?
Yes, I did.
And you know that this is a signed affidavit where you swore to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I am aware.
You would recognize a copy of that affidavit if I showed it to you today?
Yes, I would.
Objection, Your Honor. Proper impeachment.
Can you elaborate?
Your Honor, she didn't state what exactly she was referring to that she is trying to impeach Miss Osborne for, the statement. Miss Osborne did say that she recalled saying that the wedding was doomed from the start.
I don't believe an impeachment has occurred yet, so I think your objection is untimely. Feel free to re-raise when an impeachment has happened.
Yes, Your Honor.
To address opposing counsel's concern, I'll ask the question one more time. Ms. Osborne, is it your testimony today that you didn't say that the wedding was doomed from the start?
Yes, I agree it was doomed from the start, but like I said, nothing I couldn't handle.
Throughout the entire process, Genesis and Harper were constantly attacking each other?
Yes, they were arguing a lot, but it was mutual.
And you noticed the tensions really hit a high point when a voicemail was made from Genesis to Harper.
Yeah, the voicemail was very unexpected.
Harper played that voicemail for you?
Yes, she did.
You're familiar with Exhibit 8, which is the transcription of that voicemail?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Channinson, would you please pull up Exhibit 8? Per stipulation 3, it is pre-admitted. You heard Genesis say that Genesis and Casey were going to move to France after the wedding.
Yes, she was clearly drunk, but she did say that they were moving to France.
And that they were never going to come back?
Yeah.
And after that, Harper said some threatening comments to Genesis.
Yeah, it was in the heat of the moment. She said some pretty ugly things, but I personally don't think she meant them.
Well, Harper said to you, one of these days, Genesis will drink the wrong thing and it will kill Genesis.
Yeah, like I said, she said some pretty harsh things, but I personally don't believe she meant any of them.
Directing you back to my question, she did say that, correct?
Yes, like I said, she did.
I like to discuss the day Harper made that happen. On the day of the rehearsal, you didn't see the car of wine properly at all.
I did see the bottle.
Well, you were 40 feet away.
I didn't see it up close, but I did see it while it was being presented to Genesis.
Well, if I asked you to identify that bottle by label or name, you couldn't do it, could you?
No, I could not.
So whether or not Genesis actually drank from that bottle, you wouldn't know.
Well, I saw her pouring several glasses of wine, but like you said, I never saw her actually drink them.
And how much she drank that night, you wouldn't know that either.
No, I wouldn't.
But you were there for the moment that Harper presented the bottle to Genesis.
Yes, I was.
And you heard Harper say, "Don't open this in front of other people."
Well, yes, it was a gesture that Harper wanted to be solely for Genesis, not to be shared with anyone else. It was a gift.
And you heard Harper tell Genesis, "This is just for you."
Yes, like I said.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.
Any redirect for Ms. Osborne?
No redirect, Your Honor. We ask that this witness can step down.
Ms. Osborne, you're excused. We'll wait a minute before you call your next witness. Defense, go ahead, call your next witness.
At this time, Your Honor, defense calls Dr. Cannon to the stand.
Dr. Cannon, proceed when ready.
Would you please introduce yourself to the court?
Sorry about that. Hello, my name is Dr. Rebecca Cannon.
And what do you do for a living, Dr. Cannon?
Well, my real passion is teaching. I did that at Midlands Med from 2005 to 2014. Eventually, I shifted into consulting work because, well, frankly, it pays better. That's what I've been doing ever since. I specialize in toxicology and pharmacology.
Can you tell us what the difference is between toxicology and pharmacology?
Yeah, I actually get this question a lot. Essentially, pharmacology is the study of chemicals working for our body, and toxicology is the study of chemicals working against it.
And could you tell the court a little about your educational background?
Sure. I got my bachelor's of science in chemistry from The Ohio State University, and then went on to get my MD from Harvard Medical School in '96.
Have you ever been published in your field?
Yes, as a professor, I got to work on a lot of really fun research projects with my students. So I've actually been published over 50 times. Most of my papers are published on the subject of toxicology specifically.
So let's move to today's case. What is your involvement?
For today's case, I was asked to review the expert report of Dr. Jimin Kwan and provide my own findings regarding the death of Genesis Petrillo.
And how did you go about reviewing that report?
I used the gold standard in the field of consulting, the process of comparative analysis. Essentially, I read over Dr. Kwan's report and compared it to best practice.
And did you reliably apply that method?
I did.
And what materials did you rely on to come to your conclusions in today's case?
I was given the expert report of Dr. Kwan, along with the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez and any relevant exhibits.
Were these materials sufficient?
They were.
Okay, so when you were reviewing Dr. Kwan's report, was there anything that stuck out to you?
Dr. Kwan seems to believe that the death of Genesis Petrillo is an open and shut poisoning case. I've worked with Dr. Kwan before, and I have the utmost faith in his ability as a doctor. But there were several questions raised for me as I went through his report.
What questions did you have?
Well, to be more specific, I think there are at least 3 other explanations as to what could have happened to Genesis on July 7th. Specifically, a pre-existing condition, allergic reaction, or alcohol poisoning.
I'd like to break those down one by one. What led you to suspect that Petrillo could have had a pre-existing condition?
Dr. Kwan noted a couple of symptoms that Ms. Petrillo was experiencing that led him to diagnose her with a pesticide exposure. Now, while this is a possibility, I have actually seen cases of liver disease mimic these symptoms to a T.
What are those symptoms?
Well, Petrillo likely would have had strange symptoms for someone who had just been drinking alcohol, such as constricted pupils, slowed heart rate, that kind of thing. And this is due to lower levels of acetylcholinesterase, the compound that is coincidentally affected by organophosphates as well.
Can this condition be fatal?
On its own, it's extremely unlikely. However, with long-term drinking or any kind of exposure to substances, it's definitely a possibility.
And is it possible that Petrillo could have been living with this condition without knowing it?
Yes, it's definitely possible. The symptoms of liver disease can sometimes be mild and go undetected for years. Genesis's medical records reflect that she hadn't had a checkup in a while.
Okay, so let's move on to the next possible explanation. Why is an allergic reaction a possibility?
Well, allergies are actually super fascinating. My favorite course that I taught at Midlands Med was on allergies and food. What I always tell people that ask me about allergies is that it's one of the things in the medical field that is evolving the most rapidly. We learn new things about allergies every single day. In my opinion, allergies should be considered for any poisoning case.
And why is that?
Well, allergies are like teenagers. They can be unpredictable and moody. You never know when they'll flare up. And a lot of times allergic reactions can mimic the symptoms of poisoning.
How likely is it that Petrillo suffered an allergic reaction on June 7th?
It's not super likely that she would have had some kind of anaphylaxis without a visible rash or inflammation of some kind. But since Petrillo was sampling many different foods and drinks at a buffet the night before she died, I can't rule it out.
And then moving on to alcohol poisoning. Why did you consider this as a possible cause of death?
Out of all of the possible explanations, I think this is probably the most likely. Dr. Kwan actually initially admitted Petrillo for a possible alcohol poisoning, but ruled it out since the symptoms were inconsistent. I think this was hasty.
And why do you think this was hasty?
Well, while I acknowledge that Petrillo's blood reflected a BAC of 0.16, which is not generally considered to be life-threatening, it is worth noting that her blood was tested many hours after she stopped drinking.
Why is that important?
Well, her body was likely in an elimination state at that point, and 0.16 may not be an accurate measurement of her peak BAC. I actually brought along a chart that kind of shows this a little bit better.
At this time, Your Honor, defense asks permission to share this chart to the screen for demonstrative purposes.
Has the plaintiff had an opportunity to see this chart before it's put up?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection to defense putting that demonstrative up at this time?
Not at this time, but I would like to reserve the right to object depending on how they use it.
So noted. Go ahead, Ms. Peterson.
Ms. Polk, would you please share demonstrative aid? Okay. What are we looking at here, Dr. Cannon?
Well, this is a chart that reflects every possibility for Genesis's blood alcohol content the night of June 7th, 2019. It's not an exact representation, just kind of showing what the trajectory might look like based on a couple of different scenarios. The blue line, the orange line actually reflects the most likely trajectory of alcohol in Genesis's bloodstream, showing her BAC continue to climb as she was drinking and begin to drop off as her body processes that ethanol. Now, the blue line reflects a body in the absorption phase, but I was able to rule this out pretty quickly.
Why were you able to rule this out?
Well, in order for her blood to follow this trajectory of absorption, Genesis would have needed to continue to drink all night long. According to all the materials I looked at, Genesis didn't drink anything after 12:42 a.m.
What does that mean?
Essentially, it means that Genesis's BAC was probably much higher earlier in the night.
So what did all of this lead you to conclude?
Well, while I acknowledge that Dr. Kwan's explanation for Genesis's death is definitely a possibility, and that it is more likely than the alternative explanations that I offered, this doesn't mean that it's the only possibility, or that it's even likely at all. I think this case is much more complicated than Dr. Kwan acknowledges, and I would hesitate to provide a definitive cause of death at all.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Dr. Cannon, I want to talk a little bit about your conflict of interest, if that's all right.
Sure.
You have only testified for the defense.
Correct. I'm a consultant, so I wouldn't ever really testify for the plaintiff. It's not what I do.
That's right. Gardner Consulting is who you work for.
Yes.
Gardner's biggest client is Desky Roach.
Yes, that is correct.
They make pesticides.
They do.
And their CEO told you that it was extremely important, if you want to continue to have our business, that a pesticide is not found responsible for Genesis's death.
Yes, that conversation did take place, and I included it in my report in the interest of full disclosure, but I did ultimately find pesticides as a possibility for Genesis's death, so I ignored those instructions.
If you lost their business, your company would lose a lot of money.
In theory, yes, but I think the integrity of my work is much more important.
That's right. Even despite this, you determined that the facts are consistent with the conclusion that Genesis died from pesticide-contaminated wine.
They're definitely consistent with that conclusion, but it's not the only conclusion, and I think that it's important that we look at all possibilities here.
All right, Dr. Cannon, let's talk about those other conclusions that you wrote about.
Sure.
You mentioned on direct examination that Genesis could have died from alcohol poisoning.
Yes.
But Genesis's blood alcohol level was 0.16.
Yes, that's correct, which is actually why I brought along that chart to kind of help people understand that if BAC is tested several hours after a person stops drinking, it's likely not indicative of their actual peak BAC.
Well, let's talk about that chart. Mr. Liu, could you please put that chart on the screen? Now, Dr. Cannon, there are 2 lines on this graph, correct?
Yes, there are.
But you only know Genesis's blood alcohol concentration at one point in time.
Yes.
You knew that it was 0.16.
Yes, that is what her blood reflected when it was tested.
So all of these other points are merely guesses with no basis in scientific fact.
So this chart isn't actually indicative of Genesis's actual peak BAC. I just wanted to be able to demonstrate for people to be able to see kind of what trajectory her BAC likely would have followed. It's just an example.
So you're telling us that this case has no relevance to Genesis's specific symptoms?
This chart?
Yes.
No, that's not what I'm telling you.
So you're telling me that this was the path that Genesis's blood alcohol level took?
It's the likely path that her BAC took. I can't say exactly, but I can, using a process of elimination, say what her BAC likely looked like.
But you can't approximate.
I'm sorry?
You cannot approximate the blood alcohol peak.
That's not true.
Do you remember preparing a report?
Yes, I do.
And you know that you had up until today in trial to change this report?
Yes.
And you know that you had to show all of your facts and conclusions?
Yes.
Mr. Liu, can you please pull up her report and go to line 78? Please read silently as I read it aloud. While we cannot determine or even approximate Petrillo's exact BAC to any degree of scientific certainty. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did. And what you
Mr.
asked
Liu, you
me
can
was
stop
whether
sharing
or
that on
not
the
I could
screen.
actually approximate her peak BAC. Now, I can approximate that her BAC was going up as she was drinking and went back down after she stopped, which is sort of a guess, which is what approximate means.
Dr. Cannon, I want to be very clear for the members of the jury. You have never seen someone die of alcohol poisoning with a BAC lower than 0.3.
That is correct, yes.
And alcohol poisoning doesn't explain the constricted pupils.
No, it does not, which is why we looked at other possibilities like liver disease.
It doesn't explain the lower ACHE levels.
No, it does not.
Alcohol poisoning fails to explain the pesticides in Genesis's stomach and blood.
That is correct.
It is highly unlikely that Genesis died of alcohol poisoning.
That is correct.
Now, you just mentioned that he could have died of liver disease. So you wrote this in your report, correct?
Yes, I did.
But you believe that this is an even less likely cause of death than alcohol poisoning.
Less likely, but still definitely a possibility.
Hold up, Dr. Cannon. Let's be clear. You believe this is the least likely cause of death.
That's correct, yes.
You also mentioned that Genesis could have died from an allergic reaction.
I do believe that, yes.
But allergies fail to explain the presence of pesticides in Genesis's system
That is correct.
or the lower ACHE levels.
Also correct.
You're not even aware that Genesis had any allergies.
No, but like I said, allergies are super unpredictable. So it's definitely a possibility that someone could have had some kind of allergy and not known it.
But let's look at the facts. Dr. Kwan found no rashes.
Correct.
Dr. Kwan found no inflammation.
No, she did not. But you're
You
not
saw-
always going to have a rash or an inflammation every time you have an allergic reaction. It's just most of them. But I have seen cases of allergic reaction with no physical symptoms at all.
That's right. You saw no evidence that an allergy was the cause of Genesis's death.
Not no evidence. She was sampling a lot of foods and drinks, and a lot of times people end up imbibing something that they didn't know they were allergic to at things like that. I've seen it happen a lot of times.
All right, Dr. Cannon, let's clarify everything for the members of the jury. You believe that respiratory arrest is the most likely cause of Genesis's death.
Yes.
You believe that pesticide poisoning is the most likely cause of that respiratory arrest.
Most likely out of all of the possibilities that we've looked at, but again, not super likely and not a definitive cause of death at all.
And the wine produced by Harper Martini is the most likely cause of the pesticide poisoning.
Yes, most likely, but again, we have to look at all possibilities.
Thank you for your time.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. I just ask that this witness be excused at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. You're excused.
Thank you.
Give us 60 seconds and then move forward with defense's next witness. Defense, please call your next witness.
At this time, I call Harper Martini to the stand.
Miss Martini.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Harper Martini.
Now, Miss Martini, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm originally from California, but in the 80s, I moved here to Midlands for college. Now I own a winery here.
And can you tell us about your winery?
Yeah, it's a family business called Peony Estates Winery, named after my favorite flower.
Now, speaking of family, would you please describe yours?
Well, there's really not much to tell. I have one daughter named Casey Soto, and she's all I have because I was never married to her dad. We were supposed to be adding to our little family recently, but because Casey got engaged, but that didn't happen.
And can you describe your relationship with Casey?
Casey is my everything. Like I said, she's my only daughter. She's the apple of my eye, and nothing matters more to me than her happiness. We spent all of our time together during Casey's childhood, but once she got into a relationship with Genesis, they were basically connected at the hip, which got a little annoying when I wanted to spend alone time with Casey.
And can you talk a little bit about Casey and Genesis's relationship?
I could tell how much they loved each other just by being around them. Everybody could. They eventually got engaged, but unfortunately, Genesis died the night before they were supposed to get married. Genesis and I never really got along, but I knew Casey loved her, so I managed to be cordial with Genesis for Casey's sake.
And how was your relationship with Genesis?
Well, our relationship had been rocky from the start. The first thing Genesis ever said to me was an insult about my winery. And what hurt the most was when Casey actually laughed at the remark. But that's not even the end of it. Genesis was always doing things to separate me and Casey.
And did you approve of Genesis and Casey's relationship?
No, Genesis was always getting Casey into some sort of trouble. Casey even got alcohol poisoning once while she was out with Genesis. But it was when their wedding came around that Genesis really started to act up.
What do you mean?
Well, it seemed like Genesis was doing absolutely everything she could to make me angry. She planned to have the wedding at my rival winery and also disagreed with every single suggestion I made. Then Genesis left me a voicemail that in May that upset me the most.
At this time, the defense would like to share Exhibit 8 to the screen, noting that as per Stipulation 3, the evidence is pre-admitted. Ms. Polk, would you please share Exhibit 8? Now, why did the voicemail upset you so much?
Well, in here, Genesis said she was stealing Casey away from me, moving to Paris right after the wedding, even though she knew that Casey was the only thing I have here. Genesis also said some really hurtful things towards the end, but I knew they were drunk thoughts, so I just tried to brush it off as best I could.
Ms. Polk, will you please end sharing of Exhibit 8? Now, did you ever try to make amends with Genesis?
Yes, multiple times. I wanted to have a good relationship with Genesis because I knew she would be part of our family soon. In January, I tried to have lunch with Genesis to clear the air, but she just kept pushing it off.
And did you ever make amends?
Yes, actually. Casey had asked me multiple times to bury the hatchet, but I could never get Genesis to have a conversation with me. But the night before the wedding, I decided to extend an olive branch to Genesis to try and fix things.
And what was the olive branch?
Well, every year my winery makes a small batch of wine. And this year's blend was something that I knew Genesis would love because it was very similar to something that she had really enjoyed during a wine tasting for the wedding. And what better gift than the first bottle of it? Casey had even named the bottle Cara, which I thought was pretty cute.
And when was Cara produced?
Well, it was produced back in 2018 and it had been aging in the cellar for a year. The bottle that I gave to Genesis had been bottled in May, so a little bit more than a month before the wedding. And Genesis ended up receiving that bottle at the night of the rehearsal dinner in June.
And can you tell us about the rehearsal dinner?
There was so much going on that night. I kind of misjudged my timing a little bit. When I came upstairs from getting the wine from the cellar, the kitchen was in a huge uproar. I decided to hand the wine off to Sam Arnold, the caterer, and give to Genesis because there was something that I needed to take care of.
What was that?
One of my employees said that they saw a cockroach in the kitchen, so I went to go spray it to avoid any unexpected surprises on anybody's dinner plate.
So, did you hand the wine? Sorry, did you handle the wine at all after giving it to Sam Arnold?
No, Sam was the one who actually ended up presenting it to Genesis.
So what happened next?
Well, the rest of the dinner was perfect. Everyone's speeches were amazing, and the dinner was absolutely delicious. It was a night that I'll never forget for more than one reason.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Genesis and I were finally on good terms, and Casey was happier than ever, and I loved seeing that. I left around 10:30 because everything was going well, but around 2:30 in the morning, I got a panicked call from one of my employees.
And what was that call about?
Well, somebody had been rushed to the hospital, and I thought it may have been Genesis because I saw her drinking a fair amount during the dinner, so I went back to the winery to see what was going on.
And what did you do when you got to the winery?
Well, I immediately went up to Genesis's room and nobody was there. I did notice the bottle of Cara on the floor and it was completely empty. I ripped off the label and threw it in the trash because I was so mad that the wedding might be ruined now.
And did you throw away the bottle too?
Of course, there was no reason to keep an empty bottle of wine on the floor.
And are you aware that the bottle tested positive for pesticides?
Yeah, but I'm not really surprised. My winery is close to a swamp, so we use pesticides on the property to keep bugs away. I don't know how the pesticide got on the bottle specifically, but there were some canisters of pesticide in the trash that probably could have gotten on the bottle when I threw it away.
Now, when did you find out about Genesis's death?
The next day, I got a call from Angel that Genesis had died after slipping into a coma in the morning.
And what was your reaction to this news?
I was a little relieved. Genesis was such a bad influence on Casey. I was kind of glad that she was finally out of our lives, but I was also absolutely devastated because I knew how much Casey loved Genesis, and I just hate to see Casey so sad.
Now, you're accused by the Petrillo family of causing Genesis' death. What do you have to say to that?
Well, as I said before, Casey is the apple of my eye. I love her so much. I might have had a rocky relationship with Genesis at the beginning, but we had made amends. Everything that I do is for Casey, and I only want the best for her.
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation.
Grounds for your objection?
Your Honor, Ms. Martini just told us that she had made amends with Genesis Petrillo. She has no idea what Genesis Petrillo was thinking. In order to make that conclusion, she would have to delve into the mindset of Genesis Petrillo. This is speculation.
Response, Mr. York?
Yes. By made amends, she means presented the bottle of car wine to Genesis that night, while also after giving a toast, talking about the relationship together.
Any response?
Your Honor, Ms. Martini can talk about what she felt from her end, but she cannot delve into the mindset of Genesis Petrillo and tell us what Genesis Petrillo thought of that action. To do so, Ms. Martini would be delving into Genesis Petrillo's mindset, which is speculation.
I don't believe the witness has testified to anything that was in the mindset of anybody else. I believe the witness has testified that she made amends, and the jury can take that for whatever value they choose to. So overruled. Please continue.
Yes, Your Honor.
Let me restate my question. You're accused by the Petrillo family of causing the death of Genesis. What do you have to say to that?
Well, like I said, because Casey is my only child, she's my everything, and all I want is for her to be happy. And this was supposed to be her special day. I would never do anything to ruin it. Like I said, Genesis and I had made amends, at least on my end. I would never do anything to hurt Casey, and I would never kill the love of her life.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. Martini, I want to talk about how you were running out of time to keep Casey at Peony Estates. Now, you dreamed of passing on your winery to Casey after you retired.
Yeah, winemaking was kind of a family business, so it was kind of my dream to, have her continue it.
But a few weeks before their wedding, you learned that Casey would be moving to France.
Yes.
You were upset after hearing that.
Well, of course, I didn't want Casey to be literally oceans away from me.
Exactly, because you wanted Casey at Peony Estates.
Yes.
And from your perspective, Genesis was forcing Casey to move to France.
Yeah, she was essentially stealing Casey away from me.
You learned of their plans on May 12th, 2019.
Yeah, I learned of it in a pretty aggressive voicemail.
Their wedding was scheduled for June 8th.
Yes.
After hearing that voicemail, you wanted to cancel the wedding.
Well, yeah, Genesis was obviously not the right fit for Casey if she was going to leave me that aggressive email or voicemail.
You even wanted Genesis to disappear.
Honestly, yeah.
I want to talk about how you tried to cancel the wedding and make Genesis disappear. Now, you wrote a note to Genesis in late May of 2019.
Yes, I did.
You'd recognize that note if I showed it to you today?
Yeah.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Mr. Chanison, could you please pull up Exhibit 24? Ms. Martini, this is the note that you wrote to Genesis.
As a last-ditch effort, kind of, yeah.
It's a fair and accurate copy?
Yes, it is.
Hasn't been changed or altered in any way?
No, it doesn't seem to be.
Plaintiff offers Exhibit 24.
Any objection to Exhibit 24?
No, Your Honor.
So admitted.
Ms. Martini, you wrote to Genesis, "I need you out of our lives."
Like I said, Genesis was such a bad influence on Casey, and she had also been extremely rude to me. So yeah, I wanted her out of at least my life.
Thank you, Ms. Martini. I have a limited time with you, but I'm not asking you why you wrote that. I'm simply asking you whether you wrote, "I need you out of our lives." Yes or no? Is that a yes?
Sorry. Yes.
You wrote, "Leave," and the enclosed $300,000 is yours.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
You wrote, "Leave Casey," and the enclosed $300,000 is yours.
I did write that, yes.
Genesis didn't leave Casey.
No, but she took the money.
Exactly, Genesis took the money.
She did.
And Genesis threw this note back at you on June 7th, 2019.
Yes.
Now that left you with less than 24 hours to cancel the wedding.
Well, that was my last ditch effort. At that point, I figured there was nothing left that I could do, so I just let it happen.
Well, I want to get the timeline here straight. Genesis threw the note towards you 24 hours before the wedding.
Yes.
And Genesis also wrote on that note that if you also wrote to Genesis that if she didn't leave Casey, you would take her out the hard way.
Take her out of the picture, meaning out of our lives, yes.
Let's talk about what that meant. You asked for a bottle of Cara wine to be given to Genesis Petrollo.
Yes.
Genesis was the only one to receive that wine.
Yes, it was the only bottle that we had bottled from the wine that was produced that year.
And you're aware that bottle later tested positive for organophosphates.
Like I said earlier, it was in the same trash bin as some of the bottles of pesticide, but yes, I'm aware that it tested positive.
I'm not asking you about where that trash can where the bottle ended up, Ms. Martini. I'm simply asking whether the bottle tested positive for organophosphates.
Asked and answered.
It's cross. Re-ask your question and let's get a clear answer for the record.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Martini, that bottle of Cara wine tested positive for organophosphates.
It did.
Organophosphates are the same pesticide you use at Peony Estates.
I don't really know much about the science, but yeah, I think so.
And you have access to the pesticide.
Yes, I'm the owner of the property, so I would have to have access to all of our cleaning supplies.
Now, at 2:30 a.m., you went back to Genesis Petrilla's room.
Yes, I did.
You saw that bottle of wine.
Yes, it was laying on the floor completely empty.
You removed the label
I did.
and you threw the bottle in the trash.
I was really mad, but also there was no reason to keep an empty bottle of wine on the floor.
I'm not asking about your feelings here, Miss Martini. I'm simply asking whether you threw that bottle in the trash.
Yes, I did.
Nothing further.
Any redirect for Miss Martini?
No, Your Honor. I just asked that the witness be able to step down from the stand.
Miss Martini, you are excused. Anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor. We're ready to proceed with closing.
So are you resting your case in chief?
Yes.
All right. Do we want to break before closing arguments, or do we want to move right in?
Your Honor, I'd like a brief 5-10 minute recess just to set some things up before closing.
We can take 5. We'll say 31.
Yes, Your Honor.
When everyone's back and ready, give me all clear that your teams are present, and we'll get going with closing arguments.
Defense is present, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, y'all good to go?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's go into closings. Plaintiff closed. Proceed when ready.
Your Honor, closing counsel, members of the jury. Harper Martini was running out of time. On May 12th, 2019, the defendant faced a ticking clock. That day, the defendant learned her only child, Casey Soto, would be moving to France right after her wedding on June 8th, 2019. The defendant had long dreamed of passing down her winery to Casey, but that dream was in jeopardy because of Genesis. The defendant tried bribes and insults, and when none of that worked, the defendant decided to take Genesis out the hard way. The defendant poisoned Genesis Petrollo's wine, ultimately leading to her death. For this reason, we are suing the defendant for battery. In Midlands, intentionally poisoning someone's drink is considered an act of battery. And we needed to prove two things today. First, the defendant intended to cause harmful contact. And second, the defendant's actions resulted in harmful contact. We needed to prove these by a preponderance of the evidence, which simply means more likely than not. That's 50% plus a feather. And even if that one solitary feather tips the scales of justice ever so slightly in our favor, you must find Harper Martini liable. Let's talk about how we prove the defendant intended to cause harmful contact. Now, one way of proving intent in Midlands is establishing that the defendant acted to produce a consequence. And we heard today the defendant was running out of time to keep Casey Soto at Peony Estates. The defendant's dream was to allow Casey to take over her winery after she retired. But that dream was shattered on May 12th, 2019. That day, the defendant learned that Casey would be moving to France right after her wedding on June 8th. She's going to take over the winery. She was in France. So the defendant started looking for ways to keep Casey at Peony Estates and keep her in Midlands. And that's why the defendant wrote this note to Genesis Petrollo in late May of 2019. The defendant wrote, "I need you out of our lives. Leave Casey and the enclosed $300,000 is yours." Members of the jury, the defendant's own words show her intentions and her goal of trying to cancel the wedding in order to keep Casey with her at Peony Estates. The defendant also threatened that she would take Genesis out the hard way if Genesis wouldn't leave. Members of the jury, we know that Genesis didn't leave Casey. In fact, Genesis threw this note right back at the defendant on June 7th. And that's when the defendant decided to poison Genesis Petrollo's wine, which leads us to how the defendant's actions brought harmful contact to Genesis Petrollo. We heard today that the defendant was seen with a bottle of pesticides in the kitchen of Peony Estates hours before Genesis Petrollo died on June 8th, 2019. Casey Soto and Angel Rodriguez both told us today that Genesis was the only person to receive the bottle of Cara wine, the only person to drink from it, and the only person to suffer from any illness whatsoever after the rehearsal dinner. We know that the bottle of Cara wine itself and the wine in Miss Petrilla's stomach both tested positive for organophosphate poison or organophosphates. And Dr. Kwan told us that with this information, she concluded that that Genesis Petrilla's cause of death was pesticide poisoning. Now the defense brought their own expert today, Dr. Cannon, to dispute those results. But even Dr. Cannon, a witness who was trying not to conclude that pesticides were responsible for the death because of her clientele, told us that pesticide poisoning is the most likely cause of death in today's case. Now, members of the jury, to believe the defense's case, you would have to think that all of these facts are simply coincidences. That it was simply a coincidence that Genesis Petrillo died hours after the defendant was seen with a bottle of pesticides. That it was just a coincidence that Genesis Petrillo died after the defendant repeatedly promised to take her out the hard way. That it was simply a coincidence that the same pesticide used at Peony Estates was found in Genesis Petrillo's stomach. It's just a coincidence that while Genesis Petrillo was dying in the hospital, Harper Martini throws away the bottle of Cara wine and removes the label. Members of the jury, your job today is to determine what was more likely. Is it more likely that these are all coincidences and that Harper Martini is the unluckiest woman on this planet? Or that she actually poisoned Genesis Petrillo's wine? Harper Martini was running out of time. The defendant learned of Casey Soto's plans to move to France on May 12th of 2019. They'd be leaving right after their wedding, scheduled for June 8th. The defendant tried desperately, repeatedly, to get Genesis to leave Casey and keep Casey in Midlands. And when everything else failed, the defendant decided to take Genesis out of the picture the hard way and poison Genesis Petrillo's wine. I find the defendant liable.
Does the defense wish to make a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
You have the floor.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Not enough facts to prove the act, so take a second look. Throughout today's trial, we have been asking you to take a second look at the plaintiff's case. The plaintiff has provided you with a story about how Harper Martini is an overbearing mother who hated her child's partner so much that she presented them with a poisoned bottle of wine the night before their wedding. Wine that could have easily been shared with those seated around Petrillo, like Casey Soto, Harper's own child. Now, the plaintiff believes that this convenient story is enough, and instead of presenting you with facts, they've relied on testimony from biased witnesses. But members of the jury, you're not here today to consider biased opinions. You're here to determine whether the facts prove that the law was or was not broken. So let's talk about those facts. On June 7th, a rehearsal dinner was held for the wedding of Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo. At that dinner, Harper Martini presented Petrillo with a bottle of wine, which Petrillo drank. Later that night, Petrillo was rushed to the hospital, and the following morning, Petrillo slipped into a coma and passed away. Now, the plaintiff is accusing Harper Martini of battery. Now, battery consists of three necessary elements. The first is that there was an act by the defendant. The second is that there was an intent by the defendant to cause harmful or offensive contact. And the third is that there was harmful or offensive contact to the plaintiff. Our justice system does not require Harper Martini to prove anything. No, the burden today rests entirely with the plaintiff. They must prove each element of battery by a preponderance of the evidence. which means that something is more likely than not. But members of the jury, they have failed to reach this burden today. And by failing to reach this burden, they have laid out the conclusion for you that Harper Martini is not liable for battery. It's the only conclusion that justice allows. The plaintiff failed to provide you with a witness who actually saw Harper Martini poison the bottle of Cara wine, because it did not happen. There are not enough facts to prove the act, because there was no act. Now, Genesis Petrillo died a tragic death, but there are still questions raised about the cause of death. The plaintiff called Dr. Kwan, who was supposed to give an objective scientific opinion, but Dr. Kwan already had a strongly established bias against anyone who used chemical pesticides before Dr. Kwan even became involved with the case. But you got to hear from Dr. Cannon, an expert in toxicology, who told you that she would not have been as quick to rule out other possible causes of death. She explained how BAC changes over time and how, because of this, Petrillo's true peak BAC was never discovered. And as for trying to prove intent, the plaintiff wanted to convince you that the relationship between a future mother-in-law and daughter-in-law could somehow be taken to a harmful extreme. But they've made a jump in logic and not explaining how this stereotypical relationship could become harmful. They called Angel Rodriguez to try and testify to this relationship. But through Ms. Rodriguez's testimony, we learned that she is far too close to this case to be able to give an unbiased account of the events leading up to Petrillo's death. I don't know about you, but my parents aren't always on board with the romantic choices I bring home. But as loving parents do, they put their personal concerns aside. And when Harper knew that this was what Casey wanted, she went to work to ensure that the wedding would be a success. You heard this from Casey Soto. She said that this accusation against Harper Martini is not in line with the Harper that she knows. And you also heard Blair Osborne testify to Harper's character. Blair Osborne was hired by Harper Martini to plan the wedding, and she wanted Ms. Osborne to go above and beyond for her child. She wanted the wedding to be perfect. Ms. Osborne also testified to Ms. Martini's professionalism as a business owner. Peony Estates, apart from Casey, was Harper's greatest accomplishment. She had spent her life pursuing her passion of winemaking. And Casey's wedding was supposed to be a culmination of all of the things that Harper loved the most, her business and her child. Why would she threaten her relationship with either of these? You also got to hear from Harper herself, and she talked honestly about her relationship with Petrillo. It was far from ideal, but it was also far from unusual for a relationship between a future mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. They tried to make amends several times. Harper offered her winery as the venue for the wedding, and even the night before the wedding, Harper offered an olive branch to Petrillo. She wanted to be able to put their past aside for Casey's sake. Now, we have shown you that not a single person saw Harper Martini poison that wine. There was no act, and there was no intent to harm. The plaintiff has not proven how this relationship could have been taken to a harmful extreme. On a second look at today's case, it is clear that the plaintiff has grossly misconstrued Ms. Martini's motives. And after looking at all of this evidence, the plaintiff has not met their burden. There was no act. There was only a mother working selflessly to ensure her child's happiness. You must find Harper Martini not liable for battery. What happened to Genesis Petrillo was a tragedy, but Harper Martini is not at fault. Thank you.
Does the plaintiff have a rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor.
You have the floor.
May I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Peterson told us that we don't have enough facts to prove the act. Well, let's run through those facts. We know that Genesis Petrillo was the only person to receive the bottle of Cara wine, the only one who drank it, and the only one who died. We know that the defendant threw away that bottle of wine while Genesis Petrillo was dying in a hospital. We know that Genesis died right after the defendant was seen hours earlier with a bottle of pesticide in the kitchen of Peony Estates. All of these facts go to prove the act that the defendant poisoned Genesis Petrillo's wine. These are simply excuses that Ms. Peterson is bringing up to cover up the fact that Harper Martini was running out of time to keep Casey at Peony Estates. Find the defendant liable.
With that, the matter is submitted. For while we're finishing up our ballots, could the 6 attorneys quickly pop on and say their name and what they did for statements? Because we don't get to put your names in. We just have like defense or plaintiff opener for the bottom of the ballot. So I just need a quick recap of who did what. That way I can rank you guys accordingly. Plaintiff, if you'd like to go ahead and reintroduce your attorneys for me.
I gave the opening statement, Ben Chanison, for the prosecution.
My name is Anya Edicole. I was the swing.
I'm Max Liu. I just gave the closing statement.
And defense?
My name is Matt York. I gave the opening statement.
My name is Rachel Polk. I was the swing or mid attorney.
And my name is Lauren Peterson, and I gave the defense closing.
Thank you, guys. All right, give us 1 sec to make sure everything's submitted, and we'll do really fast comments and get you guys off to lunch.
Daniel, they did push lunch, I was told, so we do have a couple minutes for comments.
Okay, awesome. Do we need to wait for a confirmation that they've gotten our ballots?
I'll ask Scott. I submitted my ballot already, but I'll just ask him to make sure.
All right, I did also, so mine is in.
Tab room is processing right now. We'll get the green light in just a sec.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, confirmed. We're all set.
Hi, everyone. I guess we'll do quick, brief introductions of who we are, and then we'll give quick comments. You'd like to go ahead?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name's Christian. I am a AMTA alum. I was on Wake Forest mock trial team for all 4 years. Co-captain my junior and senior years. I am now a estate planning paralegal. So this case was a little interesting because it does involve an estate, but yeah, relatively boring. But plan to go to law school, but COVID and such has done wonders to us all. All right, Daniel.
Hi, everyone. My name's Daniel Sanders. I'm a AMTA alum, and now I work with, I went to Miami, Ohio and UT Dallas and competed for both schools. And I now work with UT Dallas's mock trial team as an assistant. So I get to hear this case every week, just like you guys. So do you have any quick comments of things that you really enjoyed of the round and things that could do better?
Sure. To say, I'm going to try and keep it to 5 minutes. So if I get to 12:55, maybe stop me. But I did write down some overall comments. First, can y'all just say what schools you're from? I'm just kind of interested.
Yeah, the defense, we're Baylor.
We're from Case Western Reserve University.
Okay. Oh, so great round, obviously. But both awesome schools for mock trial. Hit Case Western many times, and obviously I know Baylor from Elliott. All right, so this is my first time seeing the case. I do not coach. I do not help coach. I was just asked to come and judge for this weekend. And I'm going to just note that I had a hard time following the overall arc of the case on both sides. And I think that part of it is from a framing issue. Part of it was from, I think that I said this and I did take thorough comments. So if you want to see the comments, feel free to get them from Tab. I definitely think that the themes needed work. But it's really hard for your first tournament to come up with a good theme, especially one that's not like too cute by half. 90% of the themes that I hear, my initial reaction is barf. So, it's hard, and I'm not gonna knock you for it. The next point, I'm just going to start. There's no comments for pretrial on the form, so I wanted to give comments for pretrial. So that would be from Ms. Polk on the defense and Ms. Edicle on the plaintiff. Ms. Edicle, you referenced Rule 615, which I'm familiar with. The party representatives will be the only ones who are not constructively sequestered. You didn't mention who the party representatives were. And as someone who has never seen the case, I had no idea who that was. So when people were, particularly why that's important is during hearsay objections, I have no idea whether the party opponent rule is going to go into place. So that's one thing. And then I forget which one of you, but one of you two said will do, Your Honor. It was just a little colloquial. It's not, you want to make sure that your first impression is just complete professionalism, complete polish. Wake Forest did it differently in the sense that we actually did not have our swing or middle attorney automatically do pretrial. Instead, we simply did who the most polished attorney was. And not to say that the polished attorney is the best attorney, because they're not. Trust me, because sometimes I was the polished attorney and I certainly was not the best. But the reason is it is your first impression to me. And I think that, or to any judge, and I think that that's really important. Next, I'm going to move to experts real quick on both sides. I thought both sides could have objected 702, hands down. I think that especially for the plaintiff witness, plaintiff expert, but also for the defense expert, 702 could have been raised. You were going through the checklist of the A, B, C, D, and it was so, predictable. And I really like it when teams spice it up a little and talk a little bit more about, what were the different materials that you relied on? What kind of a method is this? And, at that point, you can almost proactively be able to stop whatever objection might come from Terror Readers Association of Midlands versus Merrill Dow, which I was also disappointed that no one mentioned that because it's my fave. Okay, I'm gonna move that. And then finally for the experts, I always crossed experts, not always, but usually. And my favorite thing to do was to put the bias pocket at the end. And I think that particularly with, both attorneys did a decent job crossing the experts. I thought they were good, but I think there could have been some more signposts, some more, let's talk about this conclusion. For this, you said this. For this, you said this. All right, let's talk about your next part of your conclusion. This. And then I always end it with the final signpost saying, well, now, doctor, I want to talk about why you're making these conclusions today. Isn't it true that blah, 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 bias? And you're basically at that point just framing that everything that you just heard from the direct examination and everything like that, and all of the expert witness trying to wiggle out of your cross questions, it doesn't matter, because even if everything they were saying was true, they're so biased that that's the only reason that they're testifying and bringing these conclusions to the table. And I think both experts, even though it's not a money thing and it's more of like a career thing, have really good bias pockets to hammer home. Next, there were 2 impeachments in the trial, and I want to address them because I did not think either of them landed. I think that the first comment is who impeached Dr. Cannon? Okay. I do not blame you for changing clothes. I've been wearing a t-shirt this whole time, so don't worry. If you impeach someone and you quote a line, you need to say the whole line. It can't just be one part of the sentence or anything like that. However, at the same time, defense, you didn't call them out on it. There's case law, at least most years for AMTA, there's case law that says that you can't do that. So I really would like for that to be made in the end. And then I thought, both of the impeachments just seemed premature to me. You should have really tried to focus them more. All right, I have 2 more comments and I swear I'm done. I'm trying to speak fast. All right. Lots of speculation written in this case, and that's any AMTA case. And so the fact is that any AMTA case is going to require it, but I think it's important for both sides to be consistent with it. I think a lot of people missed objections for speculations, but if they did object speculation, which I think Mr. Liu did at one point, he then went ahead and during his cross asked the witness he was crossing to speculate. So like that did not, it kind of undercut his objection to me. All right. Ms. Peterson, why no hearsay objection about the CEO?
The CEO,
Of the consulting company.
about their quote,
Yeah.
that was just on me not calling it.
Okay, catch that in the future because that quote is damning. Boy, I was like, when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, like who's gonna believe anything this expert says? But all right. And then final question or statement is for Mr. Liu. Your cross was super effective. I thought that was one of the more effective crosses of the round. The issue is you never actually asked a question. You never had any qualifying question words to say, like, isn't that true? Or isn't that correct? Or anything like that. And if I was opposing counsel, I definitely would have called it out. But besides that, it was a very, very even round. I don't know who won based on my ballot, but it was probably only a 1 or 2 point difference. Y'all were both awesome. Congrats.
I will also try to be quick. It's interesting that you guys were Baylor. That was going to be my guess because I've competed against Baylor every single year I've done mock trial, and I know a lot of Baylor mock alum, and you guys have a style, and it comes through. It's very recognizable, which was awesome to see because it was executed well. Northwestern, great job also. You guys were very polished. Mr. Liu, I actually, I don't want to disagree with Christian, but I loved the way you cross question. That's how I used to do them because you're making that statement with so much confidence that witness has to say yes. You're just running them down the cross, and you've made your statement with such matter of fact that it's not even a question anymore. He's right. But I think that served you well because that witness just had to. They just were like, yeah. I will say the 6 witnesses in this round really, really were amazing. Fantastic performance. Also, I apologize for that I'm my eyes are looking up the whole time. You guys did an amazing job keeping eye contact with Zoom, which it was impossible for me to do because I have my camera here and my monitor here. So it was very hard for me to try to look you guys in the eye while you're talking, but I thought you guys took this Zoom format and made a very, very polished round. There weren't any issues very much with getting the exhibits up. Your teammates were ready to help you. Awesome work on that. I will say to the point about impeachments, you guys really need to lock them into the statement you want to impeach on. Do not let them wiggle out. You ask that question as clean as possible. Is it your testimony today that X? Remove all unnecessary words. Get them locked in and get a definitive yes or a no on that question. Otherwise, you can't move on. You can't move forward in the impeachment. And if you do, it's going to happen. What's going to happen is what we had with the first beginnings of the impeachment, where it gets muddy and the witness is given an out and the witness can wiggle out. And then you as an attorney have built up all this beautiful momentum. It was your testimony today. And then you have to you're like, oh no, they said the thing that they needed to say. So now I don't get to get up there with their statement and tell the world they're a liar, you know? So lock them in before you move through with impeachment. Otherwise, the process for impeachment was great. You guys asked all the necessary questions. You just hadn't established where the clear contradiction or omission was going to be. So just work on that. Otherwise, fantastic round. Great work, everybody. And if you want anything like specific, if you guys want to, ask away. If not, enjoy your lunch and best of luck in round 2.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll stick around too if people want specific stuff, but if not, enjoy your lunch and great job.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to judge today.
You're very welcome.
I agree what you said about Mr. Liu.
It's
it was
a
very
style thing, yeah.
it was a very effective cross for sure. So,
Yeah, I was very impressed with them. It was a good,
Also,
really strong round.
yeah, we're still live streaming, just so you know.
Oh yeah, I figured. I'm only
Yeah.
saying good things.
Good. Yes. Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was very impressed with the round, and I'm happy like all the technical stuff went smoothly because I don't use Zoom a lot, so I'm always like, oh, they're like, you're presiding. I was like, okay, that's fine. I can do the presiding part, but I don't know how to do Zoom. So
Yeah. Well, and I'm hoping that the rest of the rounds are the strong. Are you judging this afternoon?
if Elliot needs me to, I told him I was free to. I hadn't signed up for it initially, but I'm judging in the morning tomorrow too.
Got it. Okay. Well, best of luck to your team this season.
Thanks.
I hope I learn more about the case this afternoon.
Yeah, the case is so wonky, but there's a lot of fun witnesses. It's fun to watch the soap opera play out.
A quick question. So does it make clear who the beneficiaries are of Genesis's estate? Like who serves to benefit from, because that's something that I really want to know.
Yeah, they since they're trying to not let the kids focus on that for the problem.
Yeah.
They don't want to worry about who's gonna get the money or whatnot. So yeah, the recipient of any damages or reparations for damages is unknown, and I think it's probably would be a very easy relevance objection for them to make based on what they've got available.
Got it. Okay. Because I figured that was the case, that they were not able to comment on it or something like that, or that
yeah,
no damages were supposed to be talked about or anything.
Right.
Because of the fact that it is weird for AMTA to do like an estate of as a party.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't know if maybe there was like their will was exhibit or something like that.
Yeah. But no, they need to really just focus on proving the battery. Yeah. They don't want to worry. Like, and there's even, how they do all those pick your charge cases. There's case law to exclude anything that would have been negligence on the behalf of the business and everything.
Got it.
They've got a lot of tools to narrow people down into what they're actually talking about. It's just going to take time for everybody to get used to using all of those tools to narrow the focus. And then I think we'll start to see great like storylines come out.
All right. Well, thanks so much for explaining that. And I'm going to grab some lunch before this afternoon.
All right. Peace out.
Bye, Danielle.
Bye.